All right, let's fire up the boiler and talk about the birth of the steam locomotive. Because it's not just a story about machines, it's a wild ride full of genius, some really stubborn myths, and a high-stakes race that, honestly, changed the world forever.
You know, I love this quote. It's from 1899, and it just shows you how fast the locomotive went from being this bizarre, terrifying experiment to something, well, essential. Think about it. In less than one lifetime, if you didn't understand this machine, you were considered kind of out of the loop.
So that's the big question we're tackling today, right? The entire world used to move at the speed of a horse, period. So how in the world did we get from that to a self-propelled, fire-breathing iron beast? Well, let's get into it.
Our story really kicks off with the very first big idea. It was a concept so simple that it was completely revolutionary. And yet, for some reason, the smartest people of the day just refused to believe it could work.
Okay, so the crucial thing you need to wrap your head around is called adhesion. Today, it seems totally obvious, right? A train's smooth metal wheels grip the smooth metal track. But back in the early 1800s, engineers were absolutely convinced this was impossible. It took this brilliant inventor, Richard Trevithick, who in 1804 basically said, "Watch this," and proved that yes, smooth wheels on smooth rails could pull a heavy load.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures how people reacted. Trevithick's partner was driving an early road locomotive, and a tollkeeper was so scared by this fiery, smoky, horseless carriage that he thought he was literally meeting the devil. He just stammered for him to go on through, no charge. It just shows you how completely alien this tech was.
But here's where the story gets kinda weird. Even though Trevithick had already proven that adhesion worked, the idea just didn't stick. For years, all the innovation and all the money went down this very strange and very, very wrong path.
So this was the big hang-up. The best engineering minds were just obsessed with this myth. They could not shake the idea that for an engine to move, it had to physically push or pull itself along the ground, like an animal walks. And this led to some of the strangest inventions you'll ever see.
And I mean really bizarre solutions. You had stuff like Brunton's mechanical traveler, which was a steam engine that literally tried to walk with these giant metal legs pushing from behind. And then there was Blenkinsop's engine, which used a massive cogwheel to grip a special toothed rail. Both of them were these super complicated, expensive fixes for a problem that, well, didn't even exist.
So eventually, all this confusion gives way to a central rivalry. On one side, you have the guy who would become world famous, George Stephenson. And on the other, the incredibly practical, but often forgotten genius, Timothy Hackworth.
Now, if you look at the early comparison, Stephenson's engines, frankly, they weren't all that great. They cost more than just using horses, they had no springs, so they literally shook themselves to pieces, and they could even be stopped by a strong headwind. But Hackworth's engine, the Royal George, it was a workhorse. It was cheaper than horses, it was the first with springs for a smooth ride, and it just ran, reliably, day and night.
And the proof is right here in the numbers, 532 pounds. That's how much cash Hackworth's Royal George saved the Stockton and Darlington Railway in its first year compared to using horses. This was the moment the locomotive stopped being a novelty and became a seriously good business decision.
So what was Hackworth's secret weapon? It was something called the steam blast. People at the time called it the life breath of the locomotive. See, instead of just letting the used steam vent out, he brilliantly channeled it up the chimney. This created a powerful vacuum, sucking air through the fire, making it burn way, way hotter, and generating a ton more power. It was an absolute game changer.
So you've got all these competing ideas floating around. Mechanical legs, cogs, steam blasts, and they were all about to have a massive collision. The directors of the brand new Liverpool and Manchester Railway needed to pick a winner. So they set up a high-stakes showdown that would go down in history, the Rainhill trials.
And that was the challenge, wasn't it? How do you settle this debate once and for all? Well, you hold a competition. You create an Olympics of steam to find the one single design that's going to define the future of how we all travel.
And the stakes, they could not have been higher. The grand prize was 500 pounds, which was an absolute fortune back in 1829. This wasn't just for bragging rights. This was to decide the technology that would build the modern world.
So, 3 main contenders stepped into the ring. You had the Novelty, which was this sleek, lightweight fan favorite. Then you had the Sans-Pareil, which was Hackworth's entry, a rugged, powerful, no-nonsense machine. And then there was the Rocket, George Stephenson's engine, which, honestly, nobody really expected much from. And this is where the story gets a little juicy. A little bit of industrial espionage, maybe? Stephenson took a very close look at Hackworth's Sarsaparilla, paying special attention to its powerful steam blast. And Hackworth's own foreman, John Thompson, saw it happen and immediately warned his boss, saying, "Yep, he's going to try and copy our design." And what do you know, the rocket suddenly appeared with two huge advantages. First, it had a brilliant multi-tube boiler, which was a huge leap in efficiency. And second, it had a brand new exhaust system that looked suspiciously similar to Hackworth's steam blast, which was apparently fitted after a secret, late-night modification session.
Well, with those two innovations combined, the rocket just blew the competition out of the water. It reached an incredible speed of nearly 30 miles per hour. I mean, a speed that was just unimaginable a few years earlier. Stephenson and his rocket were declared the winners, and history was written.
But hold on, the story doesn't quite end at Rainhill, because the rocket, as famous as it is, was really just one more step in this incredibly fast evolution. The true blueprint for the locomotive as we really know it would actually show up just 1 year later.
And this was the final piece of the puzzle, Barry's Liverpool engine from 1830. It basically took all the winning ideas and put them together perfectly. It put the cylinders inside the frame, horizontally, and connected them to a cranked axle. This layout, this became the fundamental design that would dominate locomotive building for the next 100 years. This was the prototype.
So the fundamental design was finally in place. After a decade of bizarre experiments, fierce rivalries, and incredible breakthroughs, a new kind of power had been unleashed on the world. The only question left was, just how much was this machine about to change absolutely everything?